Believe it or not, there was a time in the late 90s when the idea of a hybrid sounded like science fiction. But in 1997, this quirky little sedan hit the streets and changed everything. And fast forward through nearly 30 years of evolution, it has undergone one of the biggest glow-ups in automotive history. So here's everything you need to know about the Toyota Prius. Picture this, it's 1997 in Japan, and Toyota drops the very first Prius. No, it wasn't futuristic. It was just a slightly weird-looking domestic commuter with a petrol engine and a nickel-metal hydride battery. It actually took them a couple of years to build up the confidence to take it global, and it finally landed in US in 2000. It had a 1.5-liter NZ series inline-4, putting out a combined 97 horsepower through a front-wheel drive ECVT setup. And with a drag coefficient of just 0.29, it hit an EPA-estimated 41 miles per gallon combined. But man, launching this thing in America was a ridiculously tough sell at first. The reviewers absolutely roasted it. One major car magazine tested it, got about 35 real-world miles to the gallon, and basically declared it a car that neither car enthusiasts nor environmentalists could fully get behind. Competitors were literally laughing at Toyota, with GM executives famously brushing the whole thing off as just a science project. But what made it special? The secret sauce here was the Atkinson cycle engine. What it does is it holds the intake valve open just a fraction longer than usual during the compression. This pushes a tiny bit of air back out of the cylinder, which kills the low-end torque but heavily boosts the thermal efficiency. And to fix that lost torque, they just let the electric motor do the heavy lifting off the line, making the power delivery incredibly smooth and super efficient. Fun fact, the Prius wasn't actually the first hybrid sold in America. Honda actually beat them to the punch with the Insight. It was this tiny, crazy-looking two-seater that could get up to 70 miles per gallon, but it still lost the hybrid war. The reason all comes down to its tech. Honda used a system called Integrated Motor Assist, or IMA, which just sandwiched a thin electric motor right onto the petrol engine's crankshaft. Sure, it was super light and even offered a manual transmission, but it couldn't drive on purely electric power. Add in the fact that Prius was a practical 5-seater sedan, while the Insight was a compromised 2-seater, and the winner was obvious. The market also spoke loud and clear, and by the end of 2003, Toyota had moved around 123,000 units all over the globe. So, if the first gen was just a cautious science experiment, the second gen was an absolute explosion. This is where we got that iconic liftback shape that basically everyone recognizes today. They specifically engineered it so the highest point of the roof sat right over the driver's head and then swept back to create an aerodynamic profile, giving it a really low drag coefficient of just 0.26. And under the hood, it still had a 1.5-liter inline-4, but combined power got bumped to 110 horses. It was actually a lot larger inside too, sitting right in that sweet spot between a Corolla and a Camry. They also introduced their updated hybrid system too, which beefed up the electric motor by a massive 50% to 50 kilowatts. The result? An EPA estimated 48 miles per gallon in the city and 45 on the highway. But what really took this car to the next level was the cultural impact. Can you imagine a 110 horsepower hybrid becoming a literal Hollywood status symbol? You had massive A-listers like Leonardo DiCaprio, Jessica Alba, Natalie Portman, and Jennifer Aniston cruising around in Gen 2 Priuses just to flex their environmental consciousness. It became such a massive cultural zeitgeist that even South Park dedicated a whole episode to it called Smug Alert, where they mocked Prius owners for loving the smell of their own flatulence. It was hilarious, but it proved the car was a massive deal. And by the time the second gen finished its run, it had topped customer satisfaction surveys across UK, France, and Germany, and total global sales crested an insane 1.19 million units. When the third gen was introduced in 2009, it had some massive shoes to fill. They decided not to reinvent the wheel, but rather refine it, and actually managed to drop the drag coefficient further down to just 0.25. Now, I know exactly what you're thinking. Why did they upsize the engine from 1.5 to 1.8 liter in a dedicated eco car? Well, the engineering logic here is actually brilliant. A larger engine produces more torque at lower RPMs. With the old 1.5 liter, the engine had to rev aggressively just to maintain 70 miles per hour on the freeway. The new 1.8 liter, on the other hand, could do the same at a much lower RPM. And because of this, it became the absolute darling of the hypermiling community. And if you aren't familiar, hypermilers are drivers obsessed with squeezing the maximum possible miles per gallon out of their cars. Fast forward to 2011, and Toyota realized that one size no longer fits all, so they expanded the Prius into an entire family. First up was the Prius V, standing for versatile. It used the exact same 1.8-liter engine, but got slightly lower fuel economy, making it a massive hit for people who needed SUV space without paying those crazy SUV fuel bills. Then there was the Prius C, standing for city. It was a tiny subcompact hatchback that reverted to the smaller 1.5-liter engine with 99 horses. It was absolutely perfect for tight urban environments, with an impressive 53 miles per gallon in the city. Finally, they dropped the Prius plug-in, the very first production version that allowed you to actually plug the car into a wall outlet. It had a larger battery pack and let you drive short distances entirely on electric power before the engine kicked in. The whole lineup was an absolute success, and by 2013, the worldwide sales crossed an astonishing 3 million mark, proving Toyota was practically untouchable. So, by the time the fourth gen rolled around in 2016, the whole automotive landscape had completely shifted. The Prius wasn't the only game in town anymore. You had competitors like the Fusion Hybrid, the Chevy Volt, the Hyundai Ioniq, and the Kia Niro all coming in hot and aggressively stealing the market. So, to stay on top, they knew they had to fundamentally rethink the entire chassis. It was actually their very first car that was built on the brand new Toyota New Global Architecture, or the TNGA platform. And it had the same 1.8-liter 2ZR inline-4 engine, this time with a combined power of 121 horses. They also managed to push this engine to over 40% thermal efficiency. And thanks to some serious wind tunnel testing, they lowered the drag coefficient further down to just 0.24, allowing it to hit an EPA estimated 58 miles per gallon in the city. Other than that, the Gen 4 was covered in dramatic, edgy slashes, bizarre bug-like headlights, and a highly complex spaceship-style rear end with divided opinions. Inside, it was about the same, with that classic center-mounted instrument cluster while adding a head-up display and moving the whole cabin a bit forward. For essentially 25 years, the Prius was the ultimate punchline in the car community. It was slow, looked incredibly dorky, and nobody bought one just to look cool. But then, in 2022, they completely ditched that old cab-forward eco-blob design. It even got rid of those dinky little 15-inch eco wheels and started offering massive 19-inch alloys. And everyone was completely blown away by this glow-up. Motor Trend actually crowned it as their 2024 Car of the Year. It even took home the 2024 World Car Design of the Year award. But what truly makes the Gen 5 special is how it completely shreds that slow car stigma. It now has a 2-liter M20A inline-4 hybrid engine with lighter and way more powerful motors and puts out 195 horsepower, which is a massive 60% increase over the previous generation with a 0 to 60 in a very respectable 7.1 seconds. But if you step up to the plug-in hybrid variant, you get 220 horses and a 0 to 60 in just 6.1 seconds. And the absolute craziest part? Despite this massive bump in power, it still manages to pull off an astonishing EPA estimated 57 miles per gallon in the city.